So the gateway to the university can be this space, and if we can make it as welcoming as we can, then that's a testament to the university's approach to the civic agenda. We want to be making sure people feel like this university is for them. We've got this prestige that people can't come here and just be themselves, and they very much can, and hopefully we can be that foothold for people to get
and
in.
it's almost, you have to welcome people in. I know I was scared. I still am scared sometimes of going into spaces I don't know. And what you did and what Helix did was you opened the door, and one of the outcomes is a number of the young people are seriously considered or have managed to get onto university courses. They would have never have thought about university. And one of the things we're thinking about is how did working within Helix, doing a podcast that they wanted to do, this was their idea, how did we make this weird space of a university hospitable and welcoming? And once we opened that door, how we did that.
Welcome to Continuing Studies, a podcast for higher education podcasters who want to learn, connect, and get inspired. I'm Neil McFedrin, founder of higheredpods.com and Podium Podcast Company.
And I'm Jennifer Lee, founder of JPod Creations. If you're podcasting in higher ed, you're not alone. There's a fast-growing community out there, and we're here to help you tap into it. Email us your ideas if you want to be on our podcast or know someone we should interview. Our email is in the show notes.
Yes, we'd love to hear from you. Okay, Jen, this one is quite different because you're not on this one. So
Still salty about it.
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to say it's not as good because the three people we have on are pretty amazing, but we definitely missed you.
You're not as good without me.
I felt like there was times when I was waiting for you to chime in on a question so I could get time to think about what my next question was. So that's what I do enjoy about working tandem. It gives you time to kind of like ping pong stuff back and forth. But I think I did okay. So Jen, in this episode, I recorded at the University of Leeds when I was over there for ePod. We recorded in this really awesome space at the University of Leeds called Helix. And in there is a podcast studio. This is actually the third episode in our little mini series here, where if you go back, we interviewed Abigail Harrison Moore, the professor at the University of Leeds, and she talked about her participatory research project, Whose Power. The studio we recorded in is actually where she produced those episodes for the Whose Power show. The second person who's part of this interview is Krissie Glover. She's the founder and director of Research Podcasts, which is the UK-based podcast production company, and they specialize in academic and research podcasting. Krissie and her team actually worked with Abigail to produce the Whose Power podcast series. The third person is Kerr Hunter, and he's the senior manager of Helix at the University of Leeds. And him and his team were quite involved with the podcast and the research project as well, too. So this is the third in our series, pulling this all together in the actual space with all the folks. So make sure you go back and listen to those other two episodes. We'll make sure there's links in the show notes to them. I need to make one correction from going back to the episode with Professor Moore. I mispronounced the name of the youth organization, which is all part of the research. It's the Preservative Party. I called it the Preservation Party. So I just want to make that correction that it's the Preservative Party is the name of the group that is part of that participatory research. This is a great episode. And Jen, we missed you.
Well, I'm happy that you were able to be in this amazing space. So I'm sure you guys had a great time. I'm still a little jealous, but that's okay. I know you probably did an awesome job. So let's hear it.
Yep, let's get into it. So we're recording today from Helix at the University of Leeds with Krissie, Kerr, and Abigail. I'm here for my first ePod conference, and we're sitting in the space that actually played an important role in the creation of Whose Power. For the listeners, what is Helix? And Kerr, let's throw it to you. I think this would be a great, if you could explain what this fabulous space is that we're sitting in.
Yeah, so Helix opened in September 2023. It was intended to be and is a collaborative innovation space. It's geared towards student education, but alongside that, it's for staff and the wider community. And that was how I first got in touch with Abigail, was through that community activity. We're super well used by students. It's often used as a meeting place. People come down to do some studying, but the main intention of it is to have courses-specific activity within different design spaces. So we've got immersive technology focus space, we've got a maker space, we've got collaborative working spaces, we've got studio space, podcasting, where we are right now, and studio space for photography and filming.
It's quite a fabulous space. I'm blown away by the studios. There was VR stuff outside there. You guys are quite fortunate to have this space. Have you found that if you build it, they will come? You've put this whole thing together and then these things have come out of it? Or was there a plan originally in place for it?
Yeah, there was a plan. I think there's two answers to your question. I think with early adopters, if you put something out there, they will come. But that's only a specific section of people. We were guided from the start that we had to be a programmed space because people don't just come. Like, you have to be demonstrating, if you come here, this is what we will do, and this is what we can offer you, and this is what you can get involved with. Otherwise, I feel like people do come in, and when you walk in, it has got quite a relatively corporate feel. I think that can put people off initially. And I think that programmed activity needed to happen so people didn't feel they're walking into a group of offices and they're going to see staff working at their PCs. Once you get into the weeds of it, you find a lot of fun stuff, and you see, especially the makerspace, it's messy and there's paint everywhere, and that kind of side of it isn't the kind of the corporate feel.
Have you found that because of Helix, podcasting has changed, more opportunities have cropped up at Leeds?
Yeah, definitely. So the University of Leeds has adopted podcasting for assessment in terms of module activities. So module leaders can choose to do podcasting as an assessment opportunity for students to take. Not everyone does, but those who do, we then work with those module leaders to make sure they're aware of what we have down here. But when you've got equipment like we've got here and it's for free, anyone can use it for free, why not take that opportunity? So I guess it's raising awareness from that point of view. But also it's great for, we call it experiential learning, which ties into surfacing skills, raising the skill sets of students to be more work ready. I'm not saying every job has podcasting, but if you're going into the creative industries, having that experience when you leave university is a great thing for your CV, that you're not having to learn on the job. You can actually say, I've done this podcast, or I did this as my assessment, or my group of colleagues and I have run a podcast for the last year, and you can hear it here on Spotify. Like, that kind of stuff is a selling point when they're going into the job market.
Yeah, just even getting in front of a mic, being in this, it can be intimidating.
Yeah.
So I think that's a great opportunity for students to have had that, and to your point, to put that on your CV. So let's switch from studio space to research space. And we're sitting in this very space where whose power came together. Looking back, what role did Helix actually play in that project?
I think listening to what you were saying, Kerr, it makes absolute sense, even though at the time when we first started, because I started the project in 2023 January. So we were very early on in terms of thinking about what was the potential of this space. And I think you and everybody here were really open with everybody I work with, and with Krissie and Chris and Research Podcast, for me coming in saying, I don't know what we're going to do. I already had started to learn very carefully with the group of young people, the Preservative Party, what they would need in advance in order for us to do something that was really exciting and that spoke to help them feel safe and trust the process. And you were really open because, as you say, it does feel quite corporate when you come in. But when I came and talked to you, we talked about ethics. Going through the ethics process with Krissie and with Kerr, with everybody who's worked with our photographer, Andy, has been a really important part of the process, because when you go through the information sheet, it allowed us to talk about the structures we're putting in place for iterative ethics, what might be the concerns, what the group wanted, what they needed. So it was really important for me to learn that and then to translate that. And you were really open to it. And so when we did our first training session in here, we did it a weekend, which wasn't the norm at the time, so that we could create a space that was just for us. And then once we'd brought in the food that we like, they got used to the sofas, the classroom spaces, the coffee machine. Suddenly became, thanks to you, a home for a group of young people who had never been to campus before. And that was really important. So I think one of the things that we've learned together is how this space that was very much constructed for the students at the University of Leeds and for academics at the University of Leeds has become a really important part of our offer to the communities in our city. And Leeds is a very small city for those people who don't know Leeds. It's a very cultural city. And it's very, very high up on our strategy. It's been very important to me forever because I set up memorandums of understanding with the museums and Leeds a long time ago. But it's really our campus, we hope isn't intimidating, but it is. It's a huge campus. We have something like 35,000 students here. After 32 years, I still get lost on it. But actually, it's a very safe space once you're introduced to it. And so what Helix became for the Preservative Party and what you enabled us to do and what this studio space, which feels like home, when I come back into this studio space, it's like, oh my gosh, all of that happened here. You made it hospitable. Yeah.
Yeah, I think as well, just touching on that point around the sort of welcoming space. I've talked to various different senior leaders at the university about this, but actually I feel like that's where Helix can actually come into its own in terms of the civic agenda of the university, because we actually are an open, in a literal sense, like once you're past the main door, there is no barrier to anyone being here. Unlike, no disrespect, these things happen all over the place, but libraries have turnstiles. You need to have a matriculation. You need to be a student or a staff member to gain entry unless it's pre-arranged. In here, you really don't. So the gateway to the university can be this space, and if we can make it as welcoming as we can, then that's a testament to the university's approach to the civic agenda. We want to be making sure people feel like this university is for them. We've got this prestige that people can't come here and just be themselves, and they very much can, and hopefully we can be that foothold for people to get
and
in.
It's almost, you have to welcome people in. I know I was scared. I still am scared sometimes of going into spaces I don't know. And what you did and what Helix did was you opened the door, and one of the outcomes is a number of the young people are seriously considered or have managed to get onto university courses. They would have never have thought about university. And one of the things we're thinking about is how did working within Helix, doing a podcast that they wanted to do, this was their idea, how did we make this weird space of a university hospitable and welcoming? And once we opened that door, how we did that.
I think there's a couple of things you brought out there, though, that they chose it. And I think that's really important for co-creation. So we go into these models saying to them, like I talk to a lot of researchers and we have these ideas when we go into the room that we want it to work a certain way. But actually what I learned from this process is that you need to go in with a scaffold, you need to go in with a plan and be ready for that plan to fall apart and be okay with it falling apart. It's being okay with picking up the pieces that are really important and making mistakes and being open to being challenged. The Preservative Party worked with me and challenged me, and they were open for me to get things wrong. And I think that's really important. I think a lot of times we're scared to get things wrong. Like we come and do the ethics, and the ethics like you need to do X, Y, Z. But there is flexibility to get it wrong, be corrected, and be open to being corrected. I think a lot of people, especially as you come as the expert in the space, you come in with an idea of what it should be. But actually what it should be is what they want it to be. And I think that's really important.
That was really symbolised by that wonderful photo we've used a lot. We have a photographer who's worked with us, Andy, through this whole process and really got to know the group. And within about a couple of minutes on the first day when we were recording here, one of the group had put a piece of A4 paper up on these corporate type offices with production office that they'd written in felt tip, and they own the space. And that's the brilliance of the Preservative Party. While for multiple reasons, this hasn't been a safe space, or education hasn't been a safe space, because of Helix and the group and how they're enabled by the Leeds Museums team there. They owned it, but they put the picture up and it was their production office, and Whose Power Podcast was their production and remains their production.
And if you think about the transition from Series 1 to Series 2, so we often talk about kind of power imbalance, how you address power, who has power, literally that's where it comes from. And in Series 1, they asked you to be presenter because they were comfortable with that. And then once they were comfortable in the room, they were like, actually, I think we want to present. So we had to shift focus and give them the training to be able to do that and give them the space to achieve that as well. And I think they did an amazing job. And Series 2, you ended up bookending.
Yeah.
So part of the funding is about creating new knowledge. So we talk a lot about, when I do co-creation, I talk about we are used to deadlines. We're used to funders asking for things. Whereas when we're doing research with participants, they live lives. They've got other things to do. So what I found really interesting through the process of letting them present and doing it all in one day is that you just kind of open the door to new experiences for them. And I think with you bookending, you could bring in the new knowledge without taking away from the fact that they owned it.
Yeah.
One thing that struck me when all three of you mentioned it, is there's an institutional issue right now for higher education and for universities, an erosion of trust. I found it interesting as you guys were talking of how podcasting in the studio is a way to build trust and a new way in to get past that ivory tower up on the hill. I think we're at an interesting moment right now with the institution of higher education and trust, but also access to it and different ways of access. It was interesting the way, Kerr, specifically, you talked about the openness and the way into the institution as well.
Yeah. And I think with podcasting, as everyone is aware, people are much more comfortable now being able to say that I'm neuroatypical. And how do we as an institution support that? Well, if you're neurotypical and you don't respond well to writing an essay, why should you be hindered if that's your only option? So having the availability of something like podcasting for assessment, and people might feel comfortable presenting themselves by voice, not by picture or by video or not by writing, but just telling their story, saying what they need to say. That's a great thing that we should be facilitating that option for students. But obviously podcasting is one of many styles of assessment that people can choose via their module leader if that's the route they go down. But it's becoming more important and it's becoming more open for people to make those choices. And yeah, I think that higher education as a whole has to respond to various, obviously funding is a massive challenge for higher education right now. We're really lucky that we have something like Helix, that people of all types of learning can have access to all this equipment and skills, because I run a team of several people who are very skilled in different areas, and they can impart their knowledge onto students. And it's not in a teaching role, that's in a supported technical role, making sure the students have access to that technical skill.
I think that's one of the interesting things about this project. It really helped us think about the three pillars, university life in the UK at the moment. So obviously, for a long time, you've had the research pillar and the student education pillar. And then more and more, given it's the natural space I place myself in, over the last 30 years, we've seen more and more the notion of the community, the civic, widening out, going out into the world, widening participation. And both in terms of student education and student outreach. So a lot of the work that I do is about enabling young people and their teachers to think that they possibly could come to a university like Leeds or could possibly do the arts and humanities or a creative subject. But also in terms of research, thinking very differently about who does research, who owns research, how knowledge is owned. And so for me personally, and we talked about in the last episode that I did with you, this wonderful growth in understanding that research is not done on, but research should be done with. The podcast studio, as we talked about last time, has become a really important space, not only for enabling to take place, for enabling researchers, whatever background they come from, whether they've got a degree or not, to come into this space and feel strong and feel confident about talking about what they've learned. But in the research world, we were so used to writing a book or a journal paper, having it peer reviewed and putting it out there. I'm finding, and it's an argument in the nicest way possible that I'm having with colleagues within this university and elsewhere at the moment about what is the podcast as a research output and why is it different to a book, and why should we be using it to really speak to our learning and our learning together. And that is, I think, a journey that we're only just starting to go on, and I'm already hitting walls and barriers in that where people don't listen.
Yeah, I've through continuing studies, this podcast, I've been fortunate to chat with different people from all over the world, actually, that are in academia that are working on this, just as you laid out.
And so we are talking tomorrow about the power of podcasting as a form of research, and we're going to bring their voices to the front, and that's really important for us. So at the beginning, we're going to play a trailer from Series 2 where you can see a video of us in the room. And I know for podcast geeks listening, video and podcasting is a interesting conversation. So this isn't a video podcast, it's a video trailer. I think without video, and I've had this conversation with a lot of people actually, you leave your biases at the door. And I think that's important. And it's important to us just to listen. And I think you do then equalise that power imbalance a lot more. There is still a power imbalance. Of course there is. It's hard to get rid of it. But we're challenging it, and we're trying to challenge it that way. So I think that's what we're going to talk about tomorrow from the research podcast perspective. I want to talk to the podcast producers in the room about take the risk, do it, give it. So for us, it was a new thing to do. We've done a couple more since in the co-creation participatory action research space, and it's the best thing I've done so far. I love the students. And when Abigail said to me yesterday, do you want to come to Preservative Party tonight? And I was like, yeah, I actually do. I can't think of anything better. Let's go talk to them. Let's go have some Pringles and see what they're up to, see what the next project is. So that's what I'm really interested in.
They've got loads of ideas, and of course they drive it. I think coming back to that notion of hierarchy, though, is also interesting in this space that we're in today. Because, and obviously the joy of podcasting is also it can be immediately international. And I think that's really exciting for us because we talk a lot about how do you get research into the international world? How do you have those conversations across the world? And the podcast does, with done well, can do that really quickly. But in this space, there is also someone needs to control the audio because actually the audio of Whose Power is beautiful. How you produced it. You know, you and Chris, with all your experience, you could really hear the voices. And because we actually invested a lot of money in this space in a way that other organisations can't, but a university could and took the risk, we've got really, really beautiful audio equipment. And therefore, we're able to create a sound quality that you just can't with all the joy in the world, you can't recreate doing a podcast on your laptop with a nice mic, and also the fact that we can come together and it becomes a conversation, and that changes what you do in this space.
And you take the pressure off them as well. So like if I'm honest, the majority of our podcasts are recorded online, and as you know, Neil, like you put some onus on your guests. Like you expect them to have some microphone, I guess, some access to the internet, the right backdrop, the right space to record in. But if you bring people to a studio, there is no onus on them. They just sit down. And that's part of what we were trying to do.
And I think all of this, working in Helix, working with Research Podcasts, working with Sally, our filmmaker, with Andy, our photographer, everything has been constructed to try and make it as safe as possible and as trusting as possible the space. And there are themes. When we were setting up this paper for tomorrow, we sat down together and we thought about, okay, together, what are our key themes? And they came out of the podcast. Those themes are absolutely embedded, and they're themes of trust, of safety, and of community. And that came from their voices. The other thing to say, though, if we tried to record this, a lot of communities live in very chaotic spaces. You know, you can't expect them to have a safe, quiet space with soft furnishings.
Not at all.
So we have to make this space safe for them. But once they're in it, and laughter was brilliant.
Recording it across 2 days as well, I think, made a big difference because our normal approach would be to record one a fortnight. But doing it in 1 day meant we could learn on the go, and each episode got better. And also they could see their peers come out smiling.
You know, having the blinds closed, knowing that first session, no one else was here. So we could all just take our time. And some of the group were really nervous about this. And in the end, did record. We didn't broadcast. And again, we were trying to create a space, you know, when you've got a job, and we obviously paid Research Podcast out of research grant, and therefore you had a job to do. While we weren't paying directly Helix, we had a job to do because we had this very particular amount of time in here. We had to deliver on that job in a way that was safe for those young people to experiment, to try things, and knowing that it didn't matter if they tried something, we weren't going to broadcast it. Every part of this process they were in charge of. And right to the date when we pressed go and the first episode went out to the world, they were in charge of what was going to be in that episode.
This is what I mean about scaffolding as well, that, I had deadlines, you'd paid me. You needed an output. And whether that went out into the world or not, that actually didn't matter. But it was creating a scaffold that they could thrive in that meant the world to me. So they were just like, are you comfortable? Can we have a conversation? And we had one episode where there were some of the members come in 2. So they recorded one and then they went away and came back and another person came in. There was another episode where we're all around the table and we had like 6 of us in here. And it was working with what made them comfortable. That was the most important for us.
I think we created a safe space. So this felt, they had a wonderful sense, and they've talked about this, of ownership. And that's so important. This is a university. This is one of the top universities in the UK. And yet these are a group of people who have said school in many ways failed them. And yet they were owning a space on one of the top universities in the UK, and a space that our students need welcoming into. So that was amazing. And you could see, I mean, I always think about our body language, and you can see that on the film as they go out the space, their body language changes. And when we play them, the rough cuts and the edits, it's just the most incredible thing, because we all hear ourselves. At first you're a bit squeamish, and then you go, wow, I said that. And then I've been able to use the transcripts with their support to write co-produce articles that gone into the Times, for crying out loud, as a newspaper in the UK. And I published an article a couple of weeks ago that's still using quotes from the group from that first series. And of course, again, work with the group about that. And it's that sense of, wow, I'm in the conversation, I'm in the Times. And that's what this space created. It's just that you open the door to one, or someone opens the door for me, and then you pull people through. And that, hopefully, and I think for all of us, that's always been the thing that's driven my academic career, is if I can push down a door that I'm really terrified about, if I can open that door, then hopefully I can pull people through with me. Brilliant.
I really love that bit about as well that you take it back to them to have a look at the transcripts. So if we go back to podcasting as a form of research, that is research, right? It's going back round, it's reflection. And we have in university sector a hierarchy of the written word. I think the written word is king. So a lot of times a transcript can help bridge that gap, I think, and allow people to see, okay, this is what we're doing. So we do quite a lot of work with loads of different universities and different researchers, and we are adamant now that you need a transcript. Have the transcript, and you can use it for ref case study. I've got other people that are using it for referencing, and it's about using that kind of written word to elevate what you're doing. And I think that's really important.
But also, that's an interesting one, because yes, the transcript does all of that. But what we're now doing is we're annotating the transcript to go back and go, would you say that now, 1 year on? You know, how has your learning changed? And around impact, and for those people outside of the UK, impact is a really important part of the way that universities are measured through this thing called REF, the Research Exercise Framework, and that ability to go back. But I do think what we're talking about and what we're going to be thinking about at ePod over the next 2 days is what's the next steps on that? Because as part of ePod, there's going to be a publication. I don't think translating the podcast into the written word through a book is actually going to do the effective job of really showing what participatory podcasting can and should do. So it's how do we work now with a publisher, with an editor, with a group of editors to say, can we embed some sort of sound within that so that people not only read what each member of the group said, but hear it? Because, you know, again, going back to the new cut that you've done for the session tomorrow, their laughter, it's their pauses. You can't reproduce that when you write down ... what they said.
There's so much power in podcasting and the voice behind it. You go to a podcasting conference that isn't academic focused. It's all about monetization and growth. That has not come up once. No one's even hinted that. And I just think it's so interesting what's happening with podcasting and research and how it's being used and the power of the voice. One more question here for anyone out there at other universities that is interested in building a space like this. Any thoughts you'd have for them? Is it about the tech? Like, what comes first? The tech, the space, the expertise, the mindset?
I would say everything other than the tech. I mean, I can say this openly. I mean, we had a lot of UK institutions come visit us here, and they're all still really taken aback at what we've achieved. And that's not necessarily because we've got a specific podcasting unit or because we've got a specific camera. The tech's nice, but it's the way that things have come together and the ecosystem that we've tried to put in place. As I mentioned previously, we've kind of got different spaces that cater to different things. One of the other things we try and do within Helix is to create an opportunity for sort of enterprise. And so students who might have an enterprising mindset can come and do prototyping in our makerspace. They can use our meeting spaces to meet with either academics or local businesses or anyone really. And they can use our immersive area to try and integrate immersive technologies into what they're trying to produce. They can do adverts, they can use podcasting, they can do the filming, they can do all that kind of stuff that might even take a product into a sort of that acceleration phase. We've got a neighbouring building called Nexus who have a lot of University of Leeds alumni alongside others who have started the businesses and they're being incubated in there. So this ecosystem we've tried to, well, the university has, we're trying to sort of work with as well. And so that's one of the key things we talk about when people come to visit us here. But certainly, I think it's about the people and about the ideas and the mindset of what you're trying to achieve within a space. I mean, in terms of the technology, we've bought some great technology, but we've also bought some disastrous stuff. And it's just replaced it as soon as we could, because this wasn't the right thing. You learn the mistakes the hard way by trying to be innovative and take on new things.
But I think that's really key. And it comes back to our core theme of trust, but we do need young people to go out into the world with the skills to try things and accept failure. And I think that's what's really important, Kerr, about what you just said. We are lucky here that we have been, and I hope it remains, in the economics of the modern university. At the moment, I feel very much we are encouraged by absolutely our senior leaders at the university to innovate, to try. And I'm very lucky that my head of school and the people I work with outside of the university have kind of let me go, can I have a go? And then I go away and raise money, and then I have another go, and being willing to say, I'm not sure how this is going to work. As an academic, that's quite difficult. There's a sort of history of academics going, well, I know what to think. I don't know what to think.
And that was one of the great things when we first opened Helix. One of the key drivers was to be experimental and exploratory. Because we want people to be trying, we want people to be experimenting. And failure, you learn from failure as much as you do from success. Mm-hmm. We've had, I think, 2 large screens broken by people doing virtual reality cricket because they were too close to the screen and they were smashing the handheld thing into the screen. But yeah, we're all about exploratory, trying, testing, playing. And if it doesn't work, then try again. And that was definitely the ethos of what we're trying to do in here. It's all about experimentation.
And bringing creativity into that.
But in a space like Helix, we shouldn't and aren't sort of pigeonholing people who are engineers to do engineering only. Anyone can do anything. And that's what I think is one of the key things within this space, is people can genuinely try and explore and play in any sort of field that they want to.
It comes back to what you said at the beginning about gateways, because actually the Preservative Party, the facilitators, Jordan and Esther, they then came back in a completely different project, which they're doing, and 3D printed a number of our objects in Leeds City Museum to work with blind audiences to the museum, because access is something that's at the absolute heart of the Preservative Party's work. So they wouldn't even thought to be able to do that. And we were able to facilitate that thanks to you all here at Helix. And that is about being a civic-minded university and saying, well, we've got all this incredible kit at home and all these amazing academics, and you can be a part of that. You can come and work with us. And I think the podcast studio allows us, because it's at the heart of this space, to actually out loud reflect on what happens when you bring together 3D printers, VR, maker spaces, young people from the city, podcast producers, academics. That's what happens.
And if I could just do a rallying cry back to your original question about what can you tell people that want to set up spaces like this? For me, it's invest in people, because these spaces are great. And I work with loads of different universities, and they have spaces that are similar or, like you said, broke up all over the campuses. And you go in and they're really daunting to use. And without someone there to help show you them, they're actually a waste of money. They just sit there dormant. I was at a really gorgeous setup yesterday, and all the students I was working with were like, I didn't even know this existed. So it's about people, I think. And in university at the moment, I think we're losing sight of that people matter. So that's where I'm at.
I think that sums it up. Thank you for inviting me into this space. This has been great, and it's a really awesome conversation. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you for coming to Leeds.
Can you bring Jen next time?
I will.
Well, Jen, another great episode. Unfortunately, you weren't there for it, but I am glad that you did have the chance to meet Krissie in person when you were over in London previously. One of the things I keep coming back to from that episode is that it really isn't about the microphones necessarily. It's not about the equipment. The University of Leeds built this amazing space, Helix. There's cool equipment in there, but at the end of the day, it was more about the space being a place for the right people to come together, and it being a safe place for the Preservative Party to be able to record the episodes and for Abigail to conduct her participatory research. And so I think for other higher education podcasters, that the best podcast spaces aren't necessarily defined by gear. There's a lot more to it, like trust and safety and community that can help come together to build a podcast series or episode, or in this case, research. I'm really thankful for Kerr, especially for hosting us there in that amazing space. We'll make sure we put a link to in the show notes so you can check it out. There's some pictures on there. It is a tremendous space. So anyways, Jen, why don't you, even though you're not on the episode, why don't you read us out?
I love what you're saying. I think the space is super cool. And you did a good job without me, but don't get used to it because I'm here to stay. Thank you so much for tuning into the Continuing Studies podcast, a podcast for higher education podcasters. We hope you found this episode informative and inspiring. If you enjoyed the show, we encourage you to follow and subscribe to our podcast on your preferred platform so you'll never miss an episode. If you found this episode particularly valuable, please consider sharing it with your friends and colleagues. We also invite you to join your peers on higheredpods.com, where you can connect with other podcasters in higher education and learn more from others in the field. Thank you for being part of our community. We look forward to continuing to bring you valuable insights and conversations around higher education podcasts. See you in the next episode.